Hello SWAT coaches, hello ladies. I would like to welcome you to another lecture that's dedicated to the process of preparing you the best way you can for your practice sessions. And this time I would like to talk about how to prepare for the second and third sessions. So let me begin with a story. There is a story of a shaman and a group of students who were observing his healing work. As the shaman was working on his patient's injury, the students were diligently making detailed notes, capturing every shaman's word and gesture, every movement and prayers to the helping spirits. After everything was done and the patient got well, the students asked him, when did the healing actually begin? The answer they were expecting was something like, when my hands approached the wound, or when I put the sacred herbs into the wound. However, the shaman answered, the healing began the moment I climbed the mountain yesterday and set my intent. The way to feel confident and ready for coaching sessions number 2 and 3 is to spend some time preparing and planning them. You need to take into account that in the mentorship program, you will operate within a very specific coaching format. You will give your clients 3 coaching sessions. Therefore, it would make sense for you to have clarity on how you can use these 3 sessions most effectively. Let me offer you a suggestion for organizing and structuring your sessions that works really well for this particular format. You can use session 1 mostly for understanding the client and connecting with her, session 2 for going deeper in your coaching work, and session 3 mostly for closure. Let's chunk this down a little bit. Just like we said in our lecture on the first session, our main objective in the initial session is to establish a connection with your client, give her a sense of hope, and to really get her, both when it comes to the reasons why she came for coaching, as well as when it comes to her uniqueness as a woman and as a client. We have met her, listened to her, and we did our best to understand her. Now it's your time to really think of how you're going to design the rest of your sessions so that you help your client in the most effective way. In the second session, you want to do a deeper kind of work. Hopefully, you have gathered the information you need in the very first session, and you can now plan what you're going to do, what you're going to work on. Because you have established rapport and connection in the first session, the second session allows you to go deeper and explore things in more detail. It is your opportunity to do interventions that require a little more time if needed, such as reading out loud the letters your clients wrote or working on their values. A great way to structure your second as well as the third session is to 1. Ask what's been going on for your client between the sessions. 2. Report your observations from the first session and tell her what you're planning for today. 3. Gather some more information if needed. 4. Conduct the coaching work as planned. And 5. Wrap the call up and end it. Finally, the third session should lead to some kind of overall closure. And you want to plan your final session with this goal in mind. In practice, this means that the interventions you pick and plan for your final session must suit this goal. Ideally, by the end of the third session, you manage to, at the very least, initiate some kind of change in your client's life. You want to make sure that you get them to a place where it's authentic for them to make a decision, to commit to something, and take action in the desired direction. Now remember, 3 sessions are most probably not enough to both start a change in your client's life and to do the follow-up. But with enough clarity and preparation on your side, it's possible to at least initiate the transformation they came for. Don't forget, Your clients can always sign up for more coaching and ask their new coach to work on the follow-up if needed. Now here's the question. How exactly do I prepare for my second and third session? How specifically can I give myself that sense of confidence and certainty that my clients will make progress with me? Here are 2 steps to get there. 1, re-listen to your sessions. And 2nd, fill in the client sheet. We strongly recommend that you re-listen to your first sessions with any of your clients, at least while you're training. You may not need to do this once you have a certain amount of hours under your belt, but in the beginning, this is a really good strategy to set yourself up to win as a coach. While you re-listen, fill in your client sheet. And let me tell you more about that. The client sheet is a set of questions about your client that you fill in after your first session and that you can add to as your coaching continues. This is a tool for you as a coach. It's something that will help you plan the remaining 2 sessions and that will help you make your coaching interventions more personalized, taking into consideration that uniqueness of your client that we mentioned earlier. It will also help you keep the information and observations about your client gathered in one place. Before we go any further, please know this. The client sheet is not a checklist of questions to use throughout the session. You will fill it in afterwards, ideally as you listen to your call. It will help you reflect on the session and come up with a plan for what you want to do next with a particular client. Now let's have a look at what these questions are. And some of them are pretty self-explanatory, such as personal details. This is their name, age, as well as information about their work and career. Because names have such a power to them, try to write down and use the names of the people that are important to your client. It often makes them feel cared for if you notice or remember the names of the significant people in their life. Sometimes, however, they can be a little reluctant in sharing the name of a person, especially if they have a challenging relationship with them, for instance, their ex-husband or even their current partner. Check if they prefer to share their name or if they prefer you to say your current husband or your ex-husband. Here's a little tip. If you can, try to imitate the tonality of the name the way they're saying it to you. For instance, if they lower or soften their voice when pronouncing a certain name, say it in the same way. It will unconsciously feel nicer and safer to them. Another reason for keeping track of their key relationships is that they enable you to see your client from a more systemic perspective. Your client is part of a family or a specific social circle, and the system they're part of tends to influence them in a significant way. This category can include romantic and intimate relationships. Are they married, divorced, single? Names of partners, children, siblings, or other family members. Information about their parents and the relationship they have with them, as well as information about anyone else who is important to them. Most coaches would probably agree on the fact that what your client presents to you as their problem does often not end up being the problem. This is not because they're deceptive. It's just that when we are stuck in those disempowered emotions and states, we tend to distort reality in one way or another. That's why it's important for you to listen to both the problem your clients see as their problem, as well as to read in between the lines and listen for what they're not saying. Let me give you a little example of what I mean. One of my clients, and at the same time one of our students, could not get herself to do the practice sessions. Here's how she explained why. She said, "I'm procrastinating. I feel it's just fear because it's a big step for me, and I'm not as confident." In other words, she attributed her problems to procrastination and lack of confidence. Later, though, as we went deeper in coaching, she expanded her way of seeing the problem and added, I have always struggled with words. The way I would normally approach this would be, I would find out what the client's issue is and then take it with me and investigate it on my own before getting back to them. But I don't have the answers after just one coaching call. I'm a thinker and I need time. I don't like just saying things. The reason why you want to capture how they see the problem is because you want to meet them exactly where they are when they come to you. Only as the rapport between the two of you starts to feel more solid can you gradually start expanding their view, adding new angles and reframes. In the desired outcomes section, you want to capture your thoughts on what you think is the ideal outcome for your client overall, and once again, make it realistic for the 3-session format. For instance, here's what I wrote in the desired outcome category for the client I mentioned a while ago. Let's just assume her name was Louise. Louise fears getting into her practice calls because she doesn't feel prepared to do them responsibly. This is important to her as she values responsibility and fairness. She needs to get to a place of feeling equipped before starting. She also needs to realize that her own personality and style are perfectly fine for coaching. Now, these were my private thoughts, and even though I did not give my client this summary during our call, it gave me a great start for planning my next sessions, as I could clearly see the ideal outcome as well as what needs to be done to get to it. Apart from your own thoughts and observations on what your client needs, it is of course important that they try to articulate what is that place where they would love to end up eventually. The following excerpt will show you an easy way of how you can access that information.
And the last time we talked, you said, and it was, I think, towards the end of the call, you said, I know where I am and I know where I want to be. It's just hard for me to figure out how to get across. And so just tell me specifically where it is where you are, where it is where you actually want to be.
I have so many emotions that I just don't know how to control because I've never had a role model for it. Or
What
I've been left
emotion?
to my own devices. Mostly anger. I have a lot of anger, which I take out. And I don't mean to, and I feel so horrible. But I'm like, you know what? This is my process, and I will apologize when I flip out on you. But, you know, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm tired of doing it. It doesn't feel good when I do it. And so I'm ready to let it go, but I don't really know how to.
Whenever we experience an emotion on a regular basis that we don't want to have, it's just because that emotion fulfills our needs at some level. It must be. Otherwise, we would drop it. And we'll get deeper into it. But let's get back into the question. So you are in a place where you have a lot of unresourceful emotions, if you will. And you said anger. Is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's like, how do I describe it? I don't even know what it's called. I don't know. I just feel so uneasy. I don't know if it's like, not if I don't feel safe, but I don't think it's that. Like, it's just I'm so uncontent. There's just you know, it's like turmoil under the surface, but it's but it's nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Like, you can't see on the outside why you should feel that way.
Yeah.
But still inside, it's like, you know, boiling.
Yeah, and it's like just jittery, just I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like very agitated, but I don't know what it is.
Yes.
And it drives me insane because I'm like, what is that? Why am I not content? Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting to the other part of the question. We started with, like you said, I know where I am, and you told me, well, I am in a place where I keep having these emotions that feel uneasy to me, probably feel inauthentic to you in a way, and you can't explain to yourself, why the hell keep I having these intense emotions if I'm basically content with my life on the outside?
Yeah.
Okay, so what it is that you would want? What is it? What is the place you would want to be at?
I want to just be able to just stop and notice without reacting. I can see it in my head. I know what it feels like in my body, but I'm not there.
Mhm.
And I want to be able to trust people.
Mhm.
I don't have friends.
Right.
I have
Would you like some friends?
Sure.
Yes. What would that give you that's important to you, having friends?
Connection.
Mhm.
As an aside, please notice how the client you just heard is a person whose world revolves a lot around emotions and around the way she feels. Listen to the language she uses. It's all about emotions and feeling. She also says things like, this doesn't feel good when I do it, or it feels jittery, or I can feel the place where I want to end up. This means that feeling is probably her primary way of experiencing the world, as opposed to clients who come to you and speak in either more material terms, they're all about doing, like I want that promotion or I want to leave this marriage, or clients that speak in more intellectual terms and who are mostly about thinking, such as I have this limiting belief about money, or I want to understand why I do this. You want to take a note of this because the best way to communicate with someone whose primary mode is the feeling mode, for example, would be to speak the language of emotions, which is why when she tells me that she would like more friends in her life, I ask her, and what would having more friends in your life give you that's important to you? And she says very congruently, connection. Now the excerpt stops there, but just know that as soon as she identified that what she really wants is to experience connection with other people, which is a feeling, it was easier for her to elaborate on her ultimate outcome as opposed to just leaving it at, I want more friends in my life. This is a category where I like to put important events from my client's life, events that I know had a huge emotional and psychological impact on them. This is also where I would mention when the problem began and what was going on in her life at the time that the client started to have the problem and who was in her life. As far as resources and leverage go, these can be people in their family and social unit, role models, sources of inspiration, what or who they care most about, their strengths, skills, and abilities. For example, are they creative, caring, resilient, their values, and their beliefs. It is really handy to be on the lookout for these resources and points of leverage of your client because they can often be the thing that you can call them on when you try to help them make the change they desire. For example, when I see that someone values authenticity in their core, even though their life does not reflect that at the present time, I will make sure that they know that I understand this about them, and I will affirm this to them a couple of times during our coaching. Then, a moment may come when I will use this resource of theirs and ask them if this decision, this action, or this behavior, whatever they try to change, is something that reflects the thing they value so much, like they confirmed before, authenticity. And if they say no, it doesn't reflect authenticity, it becomes not only their resource, but also their point of leverage, because people hate the feeling of being inconsistent with how they see their own identity. Obviously, people they care about can be both a huge resource as well as a point of leverage. And the following excerpt demonstrates precisely that. Listen to how Crystal uses her client's daughter as a point of leverage.
Just imagine for a minute that you had a little girl, or you had a teenage girl, or you had a 20-year-old daughter, which you kind of do. Do you not around that age? 17-year-old daughter. Don't you have a 17-year-old daughter?
Yes, I do. Uh-huh.
Okay. So I want you to imagine for a minute that Victoria has gained a little bit of weight, and you can only love her if she loses the weight.
Oh, no.
Yeah, do you see how clear that is?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can only love you. Once you lose some weight, Victoria, then I can love you the way you need to be loved. Once you lose some weight, Victoria, then you're deserving of being loved by somebody, because right now you alone are not enough. You're not enough to be loved. The weight is just really throwing it all off, and I just can't love you at this extra 20 pounds. You would never feel that way.
No.
You would never treat your daughter that way. Would you say to your daughter, Victoria, I know you're in high school right now, but honest to God, I don't think you should go back to school until you lose 20 pounds. I know, Victoria, that you would like to have a boyfriend, but honest to God, you're not thin enough to be loved by somebody. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to lose some weight, and then you'll be comfortable in your own skin. Because I can really understand why you would not want to go on a date, Victoria, because, of course, you're not thin enough to be worthy of being loved or pleasured, or you don't deserve that. Could you imagine saying that to her?
No.
But isn't that really what you say to yourself every day?
Yeah. Yeah.
And isn't that the message that you're sending to her? Thin people get to have sex. Thin women get to be pleasured. Thin women get to be loved. Thin women can have a partner that walks with them at night and has bonfires and whatever the things that you do that you love out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you're thinner, when you have 20 pounds off you, then you deserve to have an orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't get to have one of those when you're 20 pounds too heavy.
Hopefully by now you're able to see why it's important to be on the lookout for what your client's resources and points of leverage are. Children might not act as leverage for some women, even though they are mothers. No judgment, but don't assume that just because someone has children, you will be able to apply what you've just heard in the previous excerpt. For some women, their wise grandmother or teacher or their romantic partner might be their biggest point of leverage. Or sometimes it doesn't have to be a person at all. It can be their religious or spiritual beliefs, and they might be willing to do anything just to be consistent with these and walk their talk. In the section of how they define themselves and how they see their personality and identity, I like to put things that they explicitly say about themselves, such as, I'm a thinker, I'm an observer, I'm very resilient, I always find solutions to problems, I'm really an artist at my core. Hopefully you can see that you can use the way they see their identity, especially if they verbalize it themselves, as a point of leverage once again. For example, in a situation where your client cannot decide or gain clarity, you can ask, what would an artist do? What would a woman that's an artist in her core do in this type of a situation? We have an entire lecture on using metaphors as a coaching intervention, so I'm not going to elaborate too much on this. For now, just know that one of the reasons you want to take a note of the keywords and metaphors your clients are using is that they enable you to build and deepen rapport fairly quickly. Your clients won't always be able to verbalize their limiting beliefs simply because these are unconscious to them most of the time. So you have to once again read in between the lines and give yourself some time to let your impressions of the client settle. A lot of times, insights about your client's limiting beliefs come unexpectedly, which is why I love having a client sheet. I can add additional information and observations as I go, and I find them there ready for the next session. This is the category in your sheet where you keep a record of their biggest fears because they are also in essence limiting beliefs. For example, I'm not smart enough, I'm not attractive, I'm incompetent. Similarly to the limiting beliefs, you also want to observe their limiting patterns, meaning their behavioral, emotional, and mental tendencies and habits. Do they tend to gain weight or lose weight according to some pattern? Do they have a tendency to exaggerate problems? Does the client often quickly jump into talking about another person or another thing when you ask them about a certain subject? Topics discussed during the call is a category where you make sure that you don't repeat yourself so that you don't tell your clients things and stories that you told them on a different occasion. As for interventions used during the call, this category is again pretty straightforward. Let me just say that apart from keeping track of what specific intervention you used and in which session you used them, this is also your opportunity to describe how your interventions went and what you found out. For instance, this is an ideal place to take a note of what your client's real self and wounded self is like, provided that this was one of the coaching interventions you used. Are they warm, affectionate, peaceful, joyous when they are true to themselves? And what are they like when their wounded persona comes out? Summary of the session. This may sound repetitive, but force yourself to describe each session with just a couple of sentences and chunk it down to what's really, really important. This will encourage your brain to think more clearly about the most suitable coaching strategy for a particular client. The very last category gives you space to brainstorm ideas that come to you in between sessions and eventually create a plan for the next session. You want to come up with potential topics to discuss, potential assignments, and potential interventions. Please know that you might not be able to answer each and every one of these questions, and that's okay. Maybe the client didn't want to share anything about their romantic relationships, or maybe you haven't noticed any limiting beliefs as you re-listen. The answers may come in future sessions. Of course, you can use the client sheet for all your sessions, not just the first one. Finally, let me say this. It might seem that the client sheet is a lot of work, but if your goal is to feel really confident doing your practice sessions, especially if you haven't done a lot of real coaching before, spending time getting ready for your sessions and doing a little bit of planning is a way to go. In our experience, new coaches often feel inauthentic when they start coaching. Going through a client sheet will help you feel authentic despite that, because you will know that you invested time in your client. Please remember to cover both the practical as well as the psychological side of your coaching. Your psychology, just like the shaman in the beginning of our lecture. Re-listen to your calls, spend some time on the client sheet, plan your sessions, but also take good care of yourself so that you can finally climb that mountain, set your intent, and be the phenomenal coach that you already are. As always, ladies, it has been my pleasure to expand your learning. Absorb it, process it, but most important, put it into practice. Good luck and bye-bye.